Breaking news in RT. Police declare anti-Trump protests in Portland and Oregon a riot after demonstrators smash shop windows and throw rocks at officers. Also this hour, Trump continues to face a media backlash, with some even comparing his victory to 9/11. Plus, Amnesty International hits out at the Pentagon for underreporting civilian deaths caused by US airstrikes in Syria and Iraq.
That may be just, say, perhaps 10% or 5% of the true civilian death toll from US-led coalition attacks.
And accusations of Russian internet trolls working for a Trump victory are discredited. We talk to them later in the programme. Hello, welcome. It's just gone midday here in Moscow. You're watching RT International, and we'll start with breaking news because protests against President-elect Donald Trump have turned into a riot in Portland in Oregon, according to local police. These are the latest pictures that do show that flash grenades have been used by police to disperse the crowds who have lit fires in the streets. Earlier, we saw protesters smashing cars and shop fronts. Well, Portland police do say that due to the criminal behaviour of those protesting, they are now classifying it as a riot, adding that peaceful protesters who are gathered in a designated area will be left alone. Several arrests have been made as rioters continue to damage property. One witness told us that he saw objects thrown at police and that some people were taunting officers.
It was kind of scary when everybody started smashing the windows. You know, I've never seen anything like that, so I didn't... I'm not even sure how to feel. I still have to process it all. You know, I've lived in this city for over 25 years, and I've never seen or heard anything like this. And I don't think anything like this has even happened in my lifetime here. I did see some, like, what looked like a bottle. Don't know if it was glass or plastic flying through the air like the cops earlier, yes. The cops are here. There's like dozens of riot cops here with their, you know, they got their pepper spray drawn. They're basically their impact weapons and tear gas type people kind of taunting the police that have gathered here in the riot gear. So it's still, you know, stuff's still going.
Well, let's look at the wider picture, because as you can see here from this map, protests against Trump are happening right across America, although most of them are peaceful. The Trump Tower in New York has been surrounded by demonstrators ever since the results were called. And then further down in Washington, activists have also voiced their anger outside the White House and other landmarks too in the nation's capital. And then down in Oakland in California, that's seen some of the most violent protests, with vehicles being destroyed and fires started in the streets. RT's Ed Schultz discussed the reasons for the unrest with Mark Simone, a talk radio host, and Dan Cantor too, the national director of the Working Families Party.
All the protesters out in the country tonight doubled the amount. You still wouldn't have one Trump rally, but they're pretty noisy.
So you think these will die out?
I don't know. You know what? To be honest, I don't think it'll die out. I think it'll get worse, and I think every step of the way it'll build. I think we got a real problem here,
right,
and President Obama needs to speak out about this.
Okay. All right, Dan, what do you think?
I think the protesters are very upset. It was a bad system then. It's a bad system now, and that's a problem we got to deal with. That said, people are very nervous. We've never had a president like this unqualified.
Let me just insert something into what you said. Now, people keep saying unqualified. You know, the Founding Fathers intended for citizens to be able to serve in government. A private citizen has all the qualifications you need.
But I mean, he doesn't really know much, so that's a different point.
Said he's qualified because they elected.
President Obama never ran a government before he got there.
So it's clear there is a lot of tension then, and in some places anti-Trump sentiment has actually led to people attacking each other.
You voted Trump! You voted Trump! Oh, yeah! Yeah, you voted Trump! Don't vote Trump! Don't vote Trump! Don't vote Trump! You voted Trump! You voted Trump! Oh,
Well, this video posted on social media does appear to show a group of people brutally assaulting a man they believe to have voted for Trump. There's also been a frenzy of anti-Trump sentiment on social media. Many users have called for violence against the president-elect, including one journalist who writes for the British Telegraph and also The Guardian. She wrote on Twitter, "It's about time for a presidential assassination," although she later deactivated her Twitter account. People, though, were quick to react to what she wrote. Some wonder if her employers will take any action against her over that post, and others do question whether freedom of speech should allow such statements and say that she should be arrested. Some mainstream media outlets also appear to have gone into meltdown over this election result. Miguel Francis Santiago has a look at that.
Protests in major U.S. inner cities, L.A., Chicago, New York, all have fallen to what can be best described as Trumpophobia.
Racist, sexist, anti-gay, Donald Trump, go away!
Mainstream media, especially on the progressive and liberal side, freaked out. CNN went further.
ISIS this morning are actually celebrating Trump's victory.
Yes, the network got the world's worst terrorists' reaction. There it is. Billionaire fool will destroy America himself. And get this, comparing the worst terror attack in U.S. history to the presidential election. You heard it. 9/11 and 11/9 are equally horrifying. BuzzFeed's already counting down to the next presidential election. It's in just over 3 years and 11 months, so hang on there a bit. And if you're suffering from the PTSD, or the post-Trump stress disorder, there is a crisis helpline. Thank you, Huffington Post. Well, dear MSM, maybe you should call it, since you obviously can't cope with the fact that America elected its president. Thank you. That's how their democracy works and has been working perfectly fine for the past 229 years. Strong enough, apparently, to tell other countries how to do it properly, until, that is, someone from outside the Capitol Hill Club gets the top job. I'm Miguel Francis Santiago.
Well, the protests have been condemned on social media, with some saying that the demonstrators are overreacting. Many also said the angry crowds were actually going against democratic principles because the election was fair. Well, Caleb Moppin spoke to some of the protesters to find out what they hope to gain.
All right, so we're here in downtown Oakland, California. Recently, in the aftermath of Donald Trump's election as the President of the United States, there's been quite a bit of protesting here, property damage and such. We're out here. It's just after sunset. We've got a crowd of about 1,000 people and lots of police on hand. So we're going to take a walk through this crowd, talk to some of the people, find out exactly what it is that these protesters want, why they're protesting against Donald Trump's election.
We don't want him there.
How would that happen?
He elected a fascist, essentially. And you look at history, and you look at when Mussolini and Hitler were elected, and you say, how did the whole world sit there and watch this happen?
We oppose misogyny, we oppose Islamophobia, we oppose any attempt to try to repress people of color, particularly Latinos and African Americans. So that's why I'm out here.
America up because we didn't elect Bernie Sanders, who stood by everyone. We are protesting for the things that he believes in and for the reason that people voted for him.
What should be done about it?
Impeachment. We need to stay single for a while as a country. We don't need a president.
These protesters say that their values are very different than the values of the people who voted for Donald Trump overwhelmingly in Ohio, Wisconsin, and Michigan. They also predict a lot of unrest in the coming months in response to Trump's election. We shall have to see what comes next, as a lot of emotions are still running high in the aftermath of the presidential vote in the United States. Caleb Moppin, RT, Oakland.
And Trump's personality is proving to be divisive, not just in America, but abroad too. Earlier, we got some reaction from Britain, from outspoken broadcaster Katie Hopkins there, and also the veteran racial equality campaigner Lee Jasper.
America right now is a broken society, and Trump can't fix it. He's a polarizing candidate who divides the nation. The nation is not going to get behind him. I think that you'll find in the coming days and weeks, as Trump struggles to put together a credible team who can last more than 2 minutes with the type of commander-in-chief and leader he's going to be.
Donald Trump has managed to actually talk to people like a real person. He's talked to people like he's heard what they needed to say. What we've tired of
Donald
hearing
Trump tells anybody
is in
what
this
they want to
echo
hear.
chamber. The Liberals live in an echo chamber
All
where they just
want
listen
to hear.
their own echo.
Donald Trump speaks out of both sides of his mouth at the same time.
I think what's really important is that for the first time they feel like they have a man who understands they want their jobs back. They have a man who understands they don't want illegal immigrants to be able to enter the country. They have a man who understands that allowing Muslims to come into the country, unfettered access, is not securing America. Do you know what? Americans look at Europe and they laugh at us, they feel sorry for us, they pity us because they say that we've allowed ourselves to be overrun. And you know what? They're absolutely correct. In Germany, Merkel has just built a wall in Munich to divide the migrants from the locals that have to endure them. And people wonder why Trump's wall is so successful. We're building walls here in Europe because we've got such a migrant problem.
In relation to migrants and building wall, America is a nation of immigrants. That's how the whole country came about. It shone its beacon as a society of freedom to the world and welcomed everybody on the basis of what they could contribute, and you could make it in America if you can try. That was the American dream. So to suggest as though America has now turned its back on the kind of diversity that led to his very greatness is, one, wrong, and secondly, I think that Donald Trump's commitment to deport, 15 million Mexicans in his first 100 days is just the politics of Fantasyland.
Well, Trump's victory is viewed by many as a protest against the status quo, and predictions are now being made that the European establishment may face even more opposition. There are several major elections coming up in the EU, and parties and politicians dismissed as fringe have now been encouraged by the unexpected result in the US, as Polly Boyko reports.
When Britain went Brexit, the fuse was lit. Then Donald Trump's election proved Americans were fired up with the anti-establishment bug too. So where next will the political old guard get a kicking? Brexit's cheerleader-in-chief, Nigel Farage, thinks he knows.
Don't be surprised to see this political revolution elsewhere, perhaps in Europe next year.
Here's how Europe's political calendar is shaping up for the year ahead. Elections for the presidency in France and the Czech Republic, German parliamentary elections, and another independence referendum in Catalonia. They're all potential hazards for Europe's political establishment, leaving it susceptible to yet more nasty surprises. Enthused by Trump's success, French right-wing leader Marine Le Pen hopes to inflict a blow at next year's presidential election.
What happened tonight is not the end of the world, it's the end of a world. The Americans now have a president they chose and not the one wanted by the establishment.
Before Wednesday, Le Pen's chances were dismissed as slim. Now French pollsters talk of President Le Pen as a genuine possibility. Meanwhile, the Dutch Freedom Party is as popular in the polls as the ruling Liberals.
And I think that the people of America, as in Europe, feel insulted by all the politicians that ignore the real problems. That is one of the reasons that you see also in Europe that things will change. Politics will never be the same, and what I call the patriotic spring will have had an enormous incentive, and that is the lesson that we learned.
And in case anyone's tempted to dismiss these as just fringe politicians, the lesson from Brexit is a small party with a big message can win the day.
I think this is a revolution. This is a follow-on to Brexit. This is Brexit 2. This is where the British told their ruling class, their political class, their journalistic class where to go, and now the Americans have done exactly the same with Donald Trump.
In a few weeks, Austrian voters might do the same, potentially electing Europe's most right-wing head of state since 1945. Until now, few viewed the populists as a plausible threat, and Brexit had been blamed on elderly British voters having a moment of madness. Now that Trump's victory is sealed, the message to continental Europe is that change can come anytime. Polly Boyko, RT, London.
Still plenty more to come this hour too, including how a popular US TV show wrongly thought it had tracked down pro-Trump Russian internet trolls. We'll have a look at that in a couple of minutes.